In this video, I'm going to talk about updating COVID-19 Q&A content and things that you should understand and consider on this topic. So at this point, you have gathered the content that your authors have created. You've gathered the FAQ and Q&A URLs that you want to import. You will have already created the QnA Maker service and imported all of that content, and then created a bot service that connects to your QnA knowledge base. You've also made a number of edits in the QnA Maker portal. You've added alternative phrases, you've changed the content, maybe you put some markdown in it, and now you're wondering about what the best approach to updating this content going forward should be. I'm going to describe a two-step process where authors and QnA Maker specialists can work together to update QnA content. But before I do that, it's important for you to understand the import behavior of QnA Maker. Re-importing content files into an existing QnA Maker knowledge base is a remove and replace operation, and not understanding the implications of that can lead to changes being lost. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so I'm back in the QnA Maker portal, and these are my existing knowledge bases. I'm going to drill into the one that we've been using. And what I thought I'd do here to show the import behavior is to make changes to all three of these sources. So let me collapse them, and I'll explain quickly what these sources are again, just to refresh your memory. This first one here is changes that I've made to the knowledge base by hand. So these are new question-answer pairs that I've added in the portal. They weren't part of the content that I originally imported. When you do that, they'll end up under a category here, editorial. I've also imported previously a URL, and in addition to that, I have imported some content that presumably an author created. So I'm going to change each one of these sources, and then we're going to re-import to be able to see the behavior that I want to show you. Okay, so first thing I'll do is go into the one that I've already added, and the changes I'll be making to each of these is just adding an alternative phrase. Kind of reasonable change that you're likely to have made. So instead of a realistic alternative phrase, I'm going to use one here that's just going to be useful for us to see this import behavior. So I'm going to type in changed in portal to indicate that this particular change was made in the portal. I'm going to do something similar to each of these other sources, and so I will say changed in the portal, and let me collapse that down and just make the same change here to this one. Okay, so now I've made all three of those changes. I will now save and train. Okay, that's done. Now I'm going to pull up the Excel file that we used to import, and that was in this file. So this presumably would be similar to what authors would have given you as you started to populate your knowledge base for the first time. And in here, I'm going to do something similar. I'll make a change to this first entry, and I'll say changed in Excel file. So that we can clearly see this particular change. Now it's important that I'm changing content that currently exists up in the portal. Let me save that. Okay, now we're prepared to go see this behavior. So I'm going to go back over to the portal. Oh, sorry, I'm going to need to close this Excel file or I'll get some complaints. I'm back in the portal, and I am going to now switch over to my settings. This is where we can import things, and I'm going to start with the file that we were working with. So I mentioned that updating in QnA Maker is a remove and replace behavior. So if I want to update this file that the author gave me and they've made changes to it, I have to remove the old version, then I have to do a save and train, and then I have to add it back in. And there it is with the change that the author made. And then finally, I'll do another save and train to bring that back in. Okay, and now let's go look at the effect of that. So I'm going to switch to the Editors tab. I will now just collapse things down to make sure it looks clear. I'm going to open up the file source that I just changed. And when I look in here, for that first item that I modified, we'll see that I lost the change. It used to say changed in Portal. Now it says changed in Excel file. So we actually overwrote the changes that we had made in the portal. Now I want to show you something very similar that happens here before we talk about how to address this situation. So now I'm going to do something similar to the URL source. So in here we have the change that says changed in portal, but now I need to update. This is an external source. I now need to update what might be the CDC FAQ page. So let's go and simulate that now. I will go over to the settings page, and then I'm going to scroll up to where I have that FAQ, and for URL input sources we provide a refresh button, so that's kind of nice, and we're going to use that now. So I'm going to do a refresh on this FAQ, and it will go back out to that page, and it will re-ingest all of the content from that page, and if there is any new content, or actually deleted content, or any changed content, I'm going to get the latest version of that file with this operation. So let's save and train and do that. Okay, so now let's go drill into the source that we just changed. And I open this up here, and when we look at this first item here, we'll notice that our change is gone. So that change that used to say, it was right here, it said changed in portal, got overwritten with the content from the URL page, right? So that is also something that overwrites its content. Now that you understand QnA Maker's import behavior, we're ready to talk about a simple two-step process for managing content that will allow authors and QnA Maker specialists to work together to manage Q&A content. So the first stage is the initial import, and you've already completed that at this point. But there's one important change you'll want to include in this approach. After the initial import, you'll retire the import files and no longer use them. These files were excellent for getting the knowledge base populated quickly, but given the import behavior we just discussed, we'll need a different approach to updating the knowledge base from this point forward. And this brings us to the second stage of managing Q&A content, which deals with the ongoing update rhythm.
Now the key to this second stage is coordinating updates using a shared export of the knowledge base.
Now I'm going to walk you through this update process in the portal and show you how it all works, but before I do, let me give you a quick graphic overview of the process, which will sort of give you a preview of how you'll accomplish this in the QnA Maker portal. So you begin the update process by exporting the knowledge base. So whatever sources you've imported up to that point, whatever changes you've made, all of that gets exported to a single export file. You'll then take that export file and you'll share it with authors, one or more, and allow them then to edit that export file. And again, that export file will contain all the changes, the current state of your knowledge base.
And so authors will edit this file either one at a time or using Excel for Office 365's co-authoring feature that allows multiple authors to work on the same file.
Now, once they've finished their edits, you'll take that shared export file and then you will re-import it. And if you'll remember, re-importing content involved deleting the current content and re-importing the updated content. Okay, let's walk through this update process in the portal. I've made a number of changes in this knowledge base to make it easier for us to see how the update process protects changes. Let me show you what I mean. Now, if you'll remember, items that you manually add to your knowledge base, that is, they don't come from an import source, will be put in the category called editorial. So for this type of content, I decided to use the phrase created in the portal. And I've done that both for the change that I made in the answer as well as the alternative phrase here. And this will just help us track things in this demonstration. Likewise, if I look at the Excel file that I imported, so this would be the same thing as the files that your authors would give you, I've done something similar. The phrase here is changed in the portal. And for the alternative phrasing, I said I added this in the portal. And finally, if we look at this URL source, you'll see I'm using the phrase content from last refresh here so that we can see how the refresh works in the update process. So just as an overall quick reminder of the process that we're about ready to do here, we are at step 1. We have a modified knowledge base, and we want authors now to make the changes that they need to make. So we'll export to a single export file, then we will edit that export file just as authors would, and then we will re-import that updated export file. Okay, we're back in the QnA Maker portal, and we want to now export the knowledge base. So I'm going to go to the Settings tab, and I'm going to scroll down just a bit, and here in the Export Knowledge Base section, we have two options. I can do a tab-separated export, or in my case, I want to do an Excel file for my editors. So I'm going to pick that, and now I'm going to say export the knowledge base. And right now, it is creating a knowledge base that contains all the changes and the current state of my knowledge base. All right, now let's go and take a look at this exported file. So I'm going to open it, and we'll see a number of columns here. Now the first three are the important columns. Let me make those a little bit larger so that you can see them a bit better. So the first two are very similar to what you probably had when you had your authors first create those files. The first one's questions, second one is answers, but this third one is actually going to be rather useful to us in this update process. So if I go over here and turn on filters, I can then come down to the source column, and if you have authors who have given you these files and they're sort of owners of those, each of these then would represent a particular author. So now I can just turn things off and on. And if this were the first author, the way they would work with this file is they'll filter out all of the content that isn't theirs, and then they can just make changes to their particular content. Now I'm going to turn everything back on, and that way I can make a number of changes and we can move forward with showing you the update process here. So what I'm going to do is I will just add a little bit of changes to the text that we did before. And the way that'll work is I'm going to say created in the portal and modified in Excel. I'm going to do that for each of our changes there. Okay, so I think I have all the changes now in there, and so with this I'll save the file, and now we've simulated a round of updating that authors have done, and the next thing we're going to do now is to re-import this modified or updated export file. Okay, so I'm back in the QnA Maker portal, and I'm ready to re-import the changes that the authors have made to the shared export file. So the first thing I need to do is to remove the old version of the content in the knowledge base. So I'll do that with the little trash can icon here for each of the sources, and then I will save and retrain. And now I'm ready to re-import the changes. So I will click Import Knowledge Base, and then I'll go grab it from my Downloads directory, I'll say sure to this. Okay, that succeeded. And now we can take a look at the import. So now if I look at each one of these, we'll see that we did indeed preserve our changes because here's the created in the portal and modified in Excel for the manually entered content. Then for the Excel spreadsheet from the authors, same thing, changed in portal, modified in Excel. And then for the external content, it also says the same thing, content from the last refresh and then modified in Excel. Okay, so great. We've now updated the file-based content. And now we will follow that with updating the external content. And if our practice is not to modify external content because we don't own it, then this all works. I can now go up and do a refresh on this content. Come up and do a save and retrain. And now if I go over and look at these changes and scroll down to the URL content, I'll see that the changes that I had made in the Excel file were wiped out, which represents the proper behavior of updating the external content to the latest version. Okay, so there you have it. We've come full circle now, and we have gone through this whole process of exporting, editing, then re-importing, and we've preserved all the changes that we cared about, as well as refreshing external content.